Hello my quilting friends! Welcome to this Quilting Basics video. My name is Leah Day, and this little mini series is designed to guide you through all the steps to quilting. And the very first step is preparing your fabric properly and learning how to cut it accurately. So the very first step of this is to pre-wash your fabric. Separate the fabric by color and throw it in the wash machine. You'll want to make sure to not mix anything like red and white because you'll end up with some pink instead. Those kinds of fabrics, reds, purples, blues, really tend to bleed, and this is why pre-washing is so important, because if you just cut it up and put it in your quilt, chances are when the quilt is finished and you wash it, those colors will migrate. So throw it in the wash with some mild detergent and no fabric softener. You don't want any fabric softener because that's not really what we want right now. We want to make the fabric kind of stiff and stable, and that way it'll be easier to cut. So once you get your fabric washed and dried, meet me back here and let's learn how to starch it next. So I'm getting started with fabric I've already pre-washed and dried, and then I'm going to apply starch. And I like this Niagara brand spray starch. It comes in a spray bottle. You can shake it and know exactly how much you've got, and it sprays on real easy. Now, the reason that we add starch to the fabric is to stiffen it. And right now, this is real loosey-goosey. It's real pliable. And if we don't add starch, it's going to be real hard to cut it and make nice, accurate cuts and pieces. So I've applied starch to the right side of this fabric, and you can see I've just applied it throughout. Now I'm going to take the whole thing and kind of scrunch it together. I'm going to bundle it together and just give it a little massage real gently. And what this is doing, starch is a liquid, obviously, and the fabric is very dry. And so the two don't necessarily like to come together and bond. So by giving it a massage, you're kind of forcing the starch into the fibers of the fabric, and that's what we want. Now to continue in that kind of goal, we are going to spread out the fabric, and now we're going to go right side down. So we sprayed the starch on the right side, now we're going to flip it over and we're going to press from this wrong side. And the reason that we do that is so, again, to encourage the starch to bond with the fabric and not to stay on the surface and flake off. A lot of times when someone doesn't like to use starch, the reason is they are not starching properly and it flakes off and it makes a mess on the bottom of their iron. It's totally understandable, but it is avoidable. So as long as you follow these steps, give it a nice massage, make sure it really bonds with the fabric, and then you press from the back, it's really going to work out well. It's going to stiffen. You can see just how wet this is, but already it's dry, it's nice and stiff and stable. Now, a question I receive a whole lot is about starch and bugs. And that is, starch is a food-based chemical. It is derived from potatoes. And a lot of people have been told that that is a bad thing to use in fabrics for quilts because it will make the fabric more susceptible to being eaten by moths, and that will somehow the starch will attract them. Well, we don't leave the starch in the fabric. We wash our blocks. We are going to rinse our blocks out after they're quilted, so we do not leave this in the fabric at all. And then also keep in mind that this is 100% cotton fabric. That's going to attract moths no matter whether it has starch in it or not. So I do prefer spray starch over sizing, best press, any of those other alternatives. I just don't think they get the fabric stiff enough, stable enough so that it's easy to cut. Now let's talk about pressing real quick. When you press, you're really supposed to set the iron down and just leave it there. But as you can tell, I'm a wiggler. I learned to iron, and ironing involves moving the iron back and forth. And this is just what I learned when I was a kid, and I haven't been able to break the habit. I get bored just holding the iron in place. So I end up wiggling it around. I have yet to find that that causes a problem for my fabric. This is just something that is, I just can't stop doing it. So I haven't found that to be a deal breaker when it comes to fabric prep, but it is something that if you can build the habit for just setting it down and picking it up and setting it down, that's actually the preferred thing to do, but not the way I do it. I wiggle the iron all over the place. So one other thing that I think makes this very easy and successful is a hard pressing surface. This is my pressing surface and it is custom built. I made it myself and is made out of a piece of plywood, some cotton, 100% cotton batting that's real thin, and then 100% cotton canvas over the top. And so it's real hard, and then the cotton canvas kind of grips the fabric and stops it from shifting and wiggling. So that is one of those things. It's an extra tool and it's something that I had to custom build, but it is something that I think is really, really important. And if you want to be successful with quilting, you really need to take the movement out of the fabric. And that means that when you have something like this that's kind of wet and you press it, you want the fabric to not move. You want it to hold firmly, the starch to dry, and the fabric to stiffen. If this was a wiggly wobbly surface like an ironing board, it wouldn't have that ability. You wouldn't be able to press it as accurately and get it as flat and stiff as it is. So here, let me show you what the fabric looks and feels like now. It's nice and stiff, it's stable, there's no wrinkles in it. It's going to be very easy to cut. Now this is the method that I use when I'm preparing fabric that I want to cut for a quilt like what we're working on now. The machine quilting block party blocks, 1 layer of starch will be perfectly fine. If I'm cutting binding, particularly binding for the edge of the quilt, binding to connect blocks together, and especially bias binding, I will starch the fabric 2 times. So I will starch from the right side, press from the wrong side, then I'll starch the wrong side and press from the right side. And 2 layers of starch, trust me, that makes the fabric that much stiffer, that much easier to work with. And stiffness is your friend here. You want it stiff and stable so that when we go to square it and cut it, it's not wiggling around on you out of control. That's going to be the key that allows you to cut accurate strips and accurate units for your blocks. So up next, we're going to learn how to square this fabric so we cut it with nice straight strips. So why do we make our fabric dance? Well, this gets the bottom edge square so that all the threads that make up the fabric are nice and straight and square throughout the piece. So what you're going to do is hold it up and wiggle it back and forth. Let me show you what it looks like when it's out of square. You see how that bottom edge kind of lifts up and we have kind of a diagonal angle running across it? That is out of square. And if you cut a strip from this fabric when it's out of square like that, it would not look good. It would be very obviously off grain and it would not be a straight strip. It would be crooked. So now we're going to wiggle back and forth. What I'm doing is I'm just pulling with my fingertips back and forth, wiggling this fabric back and forth until it looks nice and straight and even. Now that might mean that these edges don't come in alignment at all. When you have something cut at the store, unless the fabric is ripped, it might be off, considerably off grain. And so keep that in mind. If you're looking at it and going, well, why aren't the edges lining up? It could be because your fabric is very off grain. So I'm wiggling back and forth and this looks really good. So now I'm going to take this to my cutting mat and we're going to fold it in half again. So that way it's easy to cut. So now I'm going to set this down on my cutting mat and I'm just going to press that fold just very lightly with my hands. And that's just going to set it. I don't want to take an iron and press this firmly because while I'm cutting, this may shift and I may need to do this squaring technique one more time. So I don't want to press with an iron, I just wanted to press it with my hands. Now I'm going to fold it, and these are the 2 selvages on the one end, and then I've got the fold. I'm going to pick it all up, and again, I'm going to grip it between my fingertips so that I have the fold grip between my middle finger and index finger, and those selvages grip between my index finger and my thumb. So I'm gripping all of that, I'm going to pick it up, we're going to do that fabric dance again. So here I'm going to wiggle the fabric back and forth again. Here's what it looks like when it's way out of square. You can see that diagonal line running from this hand down to the bottom edge. You can also see it along the bottom edge. That's not straight. Okay, so you're just going to wiggle it back and forth. This just takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of practice, and honestly it's much easier to do with a fat quarter-sized piece of fabric, but you can definitely do it with yardage. I do believe it's very easy to cut when you're working with maybe 1 yard at a time. When I'm squaring fabric, I don't often work with much more than that at a time. I'll cut it down to 1 yard pieces and then square it up. So wiggling back and forth, this looks good. I'm going to take this to my mat, give it another hand press again, and it'll be ready to cut. So I've laid my fabric out on my cutting mat, and I'm just taking my hands and again press that second fold so it's nice and flat and it's ready to go. So this is how I like to set up my fabric on my cutting mat. I put that first fold that we made when we folded the fabric in half, that's up at the top along with the 2 selvages. Now the fold we just made is down here at the bottom. And I do this because this is the only line that I trust when I'm cutting fabric. I just made this fold, I know it's nice and straight with the grain line of the fabric. So that's what I'm going to use to cut against. What I mean by that is what I'm going to line my ruler up with when I make a cut. So the first step is to lop off this end. I'm going to line up my ruler, and I use the little marks on my ruler because I can see them and make sure they're nice and straight across. I do not use the lines on my mat because they're not very accurate. And as you slice into your mat a whole lot and it gets a lot of use, those lines can become very faint. I also don't square off my fabric by putting the ruler down here because that could be way off. Instead, I put my ruler on the longest line I possibly can, and that's this line on the fabric. Get that, make sure that there's a nice straight line across, and then I make my cut. You want to use a nice sharp rotary cutter blade so that way you don't have to make multiple passes, just one straight cut across. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm going to cut with my left hand with that rotary blade away from myself. That's the way you always want to cut. Now, in order to keep cutting with my left hand, my dominant hand, I need to flip the fabric over. So I do it just like that. Very carefully lift and flip it over. Make sure everything stays in nice alignment. So now let's cut some strips together and just walk through how this works. First thing you want to do is pay attention to your rotary cutting ruler and how the lines are spaced out. For this one, here's where number 1 starts. So I can see 1, 2, and 3. If I had it this way, I have a 1/2 inch added, and it would be really easy to cut things either a 1/2 inch too big or 1/2 inch too small. So pay attention to that. I do believe in using only one brand or one type of ruler so that way you don't make mistakes between them. It's real easy because all rulers have different sizes and numbering. It's real easy to pick up a new ruler or a different ruler and then cut something wrong. So I use only one brand of ruler at a time. Whenever I switch out my rulers, I switch out all of the rulers in the whole house. So these have been working well for me. So now I'm going to cut a 2.5 inch strip, and what I'm doing here is I'm lining up that 2.5 inch mark on my fabric, and I'm also lining up some small lines, and they can be any lines on the ruler, down here with the fold line in the fabric. And I know we have a little bit of glare here from the lights, but hopefully you can see there are some lines lined up on that bottom edge as well. So I press firmly and make my cut. There we go. So that is a nice straight strip, 2.5 inches wide. Now you want to double check your fabric every once in a while just to make sure that it's nice and straight and square. You can do that by unfolding it and look at your fold lines. If your fold, where your fold is, the fabric makes a V or dips outward to make a point, then you know that that fabric is out of square. You want to take it, do that little wiggle again, and get it back in square. You can check this at every fold. The more dramatically you're off, the more pronounced that little V shape will be. This strip looks nice and straight. So that's how you cut accurate strips. Now let's talk about cutting a strip down into different pieces. So here is kind of a mock-up cutting chart. This is very similar to the cutting chart that you're going to see in our Flower Festival blocks. This is just a mock-up though, something I've created just to show you how it works. So here we have our fabric B, blue, and it says the first thing is cut 4 2.5 inch squares. And I'm always going to list these with the biggest pieces first. And that's important because I like you going ahead, whatever that biggest piece is, go on ahead and cut a full length strip. And full length means selvage to selvage, that funny printed end to the other funny printed end. So we're going to lay this out, and I first need to trim off this end. So I'm going to turn it this way. Remember, we always cut with our dominant hand. I'm going to line up some small lines with those cut edges. Those cut edges are what I can trust right now. And now I'm going to square off that end. Now to keep cutting with my dominant hand, I'm again going to flip the strip. Flip it all the way over. So now I'm going to line up the 2.5 inch mark here with the end of that strip, And I'm going to line up the edges of the strip with some straight lines on the ruler as well. That's making sure I'm going to cut a nice, perfect square. Make that cut. So that is one square. A lot of times after you finish subcutting all of your units from one strip, you'll have a lot left over. So go on ahead and fold it up and store it in a bin so you can use it for a future block. This is how I keep all of the fabrics for my quilt along or any kind of big project organized. I keep it all organized in one bin so I can easily pull out those pieces and cut more from them, so that way I use the least amount of fabric. So I really hope that this has gotten you started on the right foot. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new videos coming out every week. Until next time, let's go quilt.